Have you ever wondered what the major differences are between the VP of sales for a $2 million MSP, a $20 million MSP, or a $200 million MSP? Well, in reality, they're actually not as big as you might think. When you're working at the higher level, the multiple hundred millions, $250 million a year, as a VP of sales, your job is still the same. Get strangers to know who you are and pay you money in exchange for services. You just have more levers that have a higher degree of leverage because you might have more team beneath you. But in reality, it's actually not 100 times more complicated than a company we're doing 2.5 million. Today's interview is with Adam Burke. He's a VP of sales for Quest, an MSP in Northern California that has a national footprint. And we had a really cool conversation about his journey through that business, how he's still driving top-line revenue, and what some of the major problems are that he has to solve at that level. And you might find a lot more advice than you would expect is relevant to you regardless of your size of MSP. Let's get into it. Adam, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Glad you're here.
No, thanks for having me, Brian. Appreciate it.
You are I'm going to say, not to start with an embarrassing compliment, but you work for the biggest MSP that we've had on the podcast. Actually, if you're not,
okay.
Technically speaking, one of the bigger MSPs in the world, actually.
Okay. All right. I'll take it. Yeah. We've been at it for a long time, but yeah, we've been growing consistently and working well. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and talk about, I want to get into your background, especially like your military background and all this cool stuff, but talk to me a little bit about just your background with Quest and what you do and kind of how you got into it.
Sure. So I've been a part of the organization most of my life. I came on formally in 2010, and my job was to go out and find other organizations in the IT market and the MSP market and the data center market that wanted to partner. So we've been historically a Northern California based organization dating back to the early 80s. And Tim Burke, who's our president, founder, and CEO, wanted to grow outside of that region. And we found that a way that could work for us. We went through a couple different cycles of the economy and .com bust and boom cycles and things like that. And we found that the best way for us to grow was through partnerships, through finding other like-minded people who wanted to help in IT and maybe didn't have capabilities that we did and were willing to walk into opportunities together.
Sweet.
So that's been my role for about the last 16 years, is finding those partners to work with.
And your title is VP of Sales?
VP of Sales and Partnerships. Yep.
Okay, got it.
So
somebody might have noticed a similarity in the last name of the founder and your last name. So just so anybody doesn't know, you're sort of a second generation in the business. Is that right?
Yeah. So nepotism is alive and well in the IT space. So I'm Tim's second son. My brother works at the firm as well in marketing and digital communications. And then I kind of had a little bit more of the sales and partnership kind of mindset. So that's, I'm Tim's son, and I worked in the network operations center when I was in college, but that was not a strength of mine. So moved more into sales.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, well, he's charming. He can't build a server. He can't do this, but he could talk about it. I want to circle back and talk about working with family because it actually happens a lot. And I think a lot of our listeners are on the other side of the table of that, like hiring nephews and nieces and stuff. And I would love, because, the best boss I ever had was my brother when I worked in a restaurant. And there's, as you know, like there's huge pros and cons to being in a family business. And I think that'll be an interesting thing to explore in a little bit. But I'd like to talk about Quest, sort of your go-to-market approach, if you will. So your Quest is it's doing a couple $100 million in revenue. A lot of that you've been around for so long. And as you said, partnerships with other firms is a really big approach. But can you explain a little bit to me about sort of your go-to-market philosophy when you're steering a ship this big and you still are responsible for sourcing net new revenue, right?
Yep.
Yeah, like if you're steering this massive vessel, like what's your philosophy around that and how to keep the top line going up?
Yeah, so I think it's core when we're talking about our go-to-market, is kind of like what we believe as an organization. And it comes back to, it's really simple analogy that Tim kind of shares on how he built the business, because you can come into an organization and try to impose your strategy, but if the organization's not built to execute on your strategy, then you're going to have some pain. And what Tim did was Tim built an organization that focuses on IT services and addressing customer challenges. And so our go-to-market is we're an IT company and how can we help? That comes back to when he was a kid, his first business was a lawn mowing gig. He had an aunt and uncle who lived in a nice part of town in Sacramento. And he decided to start mowing their lawn and decided to start going and asking other neighbors if they wanted him to mow their lawn. In IT, I'd love to say it's much more complicated than that, but hey, we sold some people some servers. We sold some people some brown reel tape or diskettes. Hey, let's go talk to the guy next door and see if he would like some help sourcing that too. And so he built a company that could address the customer needs, and then always asking questions about, hey, would you like to work with us? And then in MSP and IT services, as you know, there's 1,000 different directions you could go. What we found works for us is there's really two ways we get engaged with clients. One is we have a previous relationship in the MSP space, in the IT services space. If you do what you say you're going to do, and if you correct and make things right when you mess up, you'll get a lot of referrals. You'll get a lot of, hey, these people, I trust them. They do what they say they're going to do. They show up, they get it done, they call back. That's a big part of how we get our next new revenue, but also organizations that are in trouble or have a pain point that they're aware of. Mm-hmm. Lots of organizations in IT have all sorts of pain points, but they might not necessarily be aware of them or willing to address them.
Yeah.
So if we find that that's the case when we're talking with someone on an introductory call, we stay in touch, but we don't necessarily jump in and try to be the hero to convince them to work with us. Mm-hmm. We spend very, very little in the big SIs would call like the pursuit dollars, like going in, responding to RFPs, putting together presentations, going through that sales motion. That's not something we do a lot of. We respond to RFPs and put together responses just like anybody else, but our main go-to-market is relationships and looking for organizations that are aware of a pain point or a trouble that they're trying to address.
I want to ask you 50 billion questions right now about this, but a couple of observations are, first of all, you're still selling and growing the same way that every MSP sells and grows. Like, you're still a referral-based business. There's so many MSPs who are on the other side. They're looking at the green grass on the other side of the street, being like, well, if I had more resources, or if I had a bigger team, then I could just like gun down new business. But what you're observing is really astute, that like you don't solve a pain, you solve a pain that somebody is aware of. Uh-huh. And if they're not yet aware of it, but they're open to having conversations, you're staying in their orbit. I'm assuming you're using like education, general awareness, relationship, other referrals, and potentially some introductory projects to kind of help them, guide them in the direction of understanding what their real problem is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of effort that goes into, nurturing those contacts. In our philosophy, every client kind of rotates, and this isn't ours. It was from a sales training we took like 25, 30 years ago. I forget the name of it. But every client's kind of rotating through 3 or 4 different buckets. They're in pain and trouble. They're even keel and kind of status quo. They're arrogant, or they're in massive growth mode. And you can sell to any of those 4. Arrogant takes a certain style. Rapid growth takes a certain style. You've sold in Silicon Valley. You've dealt with founder, PE, venture capital backed guys. There's a certain way to engage. And a trap that we see a lot of people fall into, I talk to partners about it all the time, is just like you said, if only I had these resources, the field of dreams model. I joked with a partner the other day, well, if most MSPs that follow the Field of Dreams model, like build it and they will come, like Kevin Costner's farm is repossessed and he never meets his dad. Okay. Like, like, like you know, if you build it and they hope they will come, that's a really hard thing to get right. Anytime we've done that, Tim jokes about it all the time, but anytime we've done that and walked into a client and said, hey, look at this solution we've pre-built for you that you're going to want to consume, they kind of pat us on the head and say, that's cute. Here's what we really want. Right. So it's the amount of effort that I see and I've done it myself. I did it for the first 5 years at Quest. I came from a background where you just go make it happen. And that doesn't necessarily always work if the other party that you're dealing with, the customer, doesn't want to consume it that way. They're not interested in that specific brand of service. You know, their brother-in-law works at a certain vendor or OEM manufacturer, and you might have brought in something that on their Gartner Magic Quadrant is top right corner. Cool, dude. His brother-in-law works at the other firm. You're not selling that solution to him. It's not going to happen. Like pivot. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's funny. When the economy gets a little squirrely, the ability to pivot and the ability to customize or just deal with what they're trying to accomplish can differentiate a lot. Like you can take down a lot of opportunities just by listening to what they're struggling with. We started a program, that whole network as a service and, hardware as a service concept that's kind of rolling out from like some, larger backed vendors right now. We've been doing that since 2002. We came up with the idea. And then when the financial crisis hit and everyone locked up on CapEx spending, that's when we got in the data center business, because all the data centers had imploded from, 2001. There was a ton of inventory out there. And then the financial crisis hit and no one could do CapEx expenses, but the need for IT didn't go away. So we just kind of rolled with the customers told us what they were trying to do. And then we said, okay, well, if capital is the barrier, then we know how to buy assets and finance them over 3 years and, take it and multiply and divide by X amount of term. That's the easy part.
Right.
But those business conversations can, trip up a lot of people trying to, well, that's not how I planned this to go. It's like, well, cool, man. You made a good plan. It's good. Pivot,
Right.
Yeah.
So it's obviously pivoting, it sounds like it's been important. I think any business with longevity has to have been agile. Like the world in the 80s and the world today, not the same place. And even the actual technology you're delivering is like completely different. You're backing up tapes and driving them to Iron Mountain not that long ago, 10, 20 years ago, that was still like a pretty major part of a lot of people's backup. So let me ask you, how have you pivoted your sales philosophy and your sales culture over time as these things have changed?
Well, I think the ability to pivot and then the ability to be very, very, I don't do it as well, but Tim is a very humble leader when it comes to like, hey, that didn't work. Let's try this. Like he's not really tied to the idea. He's tied to the underlying belief, but as an organization, we have the underlying belief, hey, we're an IT company. How can we help? And then you pivot to see what works for what client, because it's going to change. Like acquisitions happen all the time, right? We invested a lot in early 2010, 2015 in a certain manufacturer that was going to do a powered cloud service. They spent billions of dollars promoting, like I can say it doesn't matter, Cisco powered cloud, right? We were a Cisco partner for a really, really long time. We still are. We were a gold partner, one of the first gold partners in Northern California. And they developed a Cisco powered cloud concept. We bought FlexPods. We built out FlexPods all over the United States, had a really good run. And then all of a sudden, we started getting pulled into meetings with Cisco and Microsoft. We're like, this is weird. This is interesting. Cisco and Microsoft in the same meeting. That's interesting. And then all of a sudden, like, no one ever says it out loud, but you have to be aware of it. That strategy of, hey, we're going to provide our own powered cloud infrastructure to compete with Amazon AWS or AWS and Azure,
Mm-hmm.
that went away. It just kind of went away.
Yeah. Right.
And we as the MSPs had to recognize, okay, that pivoted. So what do we do? Do we keep building out this infrastructure ourselves, or do we make sure that, hey, we have this capacity, make sure it's accommodated by customers subscribing to it, and then let's go look at this express route concept. Let's go look at the AWS partner program. Let's go look at, hey, how do we build applications in Azure? A lot of the middle market, one of our fastest growing areas and one of the biggest areas where people are struggling right now is, how do people actually get development done in the middle market? How do you actually tie your hybrid environments together and in an effective way? The big boys can do it. The Fortune 500s, they have the agile sessions, they have the scrum masters, they have the development teams. Middle market, there's some pain there. And so you just got to kind of keep moving with it.
Yeah, that's actually really good. It's a good segue because this is what I want to ask you about is you guys do quite a bit of business selling managed services into mid-market, and it is the market I have the least personal experience doing deals in.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about it a little bit because a lot of MSPs want to go up to mid-market, especially early guys who they're like $1 million or $2 million. They're like, man, if I could just get like a 500 user account, then like all my problems would go away. Or I'd have so much money and then I could hire a bunch of people and then I could go play golf 4 days a week. But talk to me, first of all, what is mid-market for somebody who's going, what are you guys talking about? What is a mid-market account? And what does an MSP relationship typically look like with a mid-market account?
So we define the mid-market in a couple ways. Revenue, typically anything over 25 million to 50 million, anything over that zone. That's kind of a threshold. Mm-hmm. Or 200 employees or greater. It's kind of like what we define as middle market. And everyone's got a different definition of it, but that's, yeah. And then usually about 200 to 1,500, 2,000 employees. That's kind of about where 60% of our revenue comes from, that zone.
Right.
And it's very similar. There's a couple more decision makers or folks that kind of get involved in the process, but more often than not, our initial engagement with firms like that start with something that have nothing to do with a managed service engagement. It starts with something like one of our largest accounts we ever got came to us because of a database administration requirement. They needed a DBA who could help them with a SQL instance there was a query that was taking way too long and was gumming up the works for their customer facing application. And they asked, hey, do you guys have a good DBA who can help us come in here and unravel this Gordian knot? And so we said, yeah. So our staffing division planted a DBA in there. That person worked out for about 4 months, helped them solve the problem. And then we got the next hit. Hey, could you guys help us, host this database? Then could you help us connect to it? And then it just kind of keeps growing. Like, I have a lot of partners who will come to me with like an RFP for like a 500 user firm, and it's managed services, it's monitoring, it's remote backups, it's, the full suite, right? It's full boat. It's what everyone dreams about. That's a bloody knife fight that is cutthroat and rough. And if you think that like there's 10 different ways you can die trying to go after that deal.
Yeah.
And you don't even see 3 of them. Right. Because so sometimes my partners get a little bit like jaded when they come to me and they're like, you always say no. And it's like, well, I don't say no, but maybe not yet. Mm-hmm. Maybe not yet, because one, we don't know that firm. We don't know how they like to do business. We don't know how they like to buy. You could spend 6 months pursuing an opportunity like that, where there's a person down the street who you're ignoring, who's that next database administrator opportunity, because you have all your guns pointed at this big RFP, and you don't know how to win. Wow. So
this is really interesting, because in the small side, if we're talking 10, 20 users accounts, there's an ongoing debate about should you take projects for clients who are not under management? And I get asked that question like every month. Hey, this person they need to move their office, but they don't have an IT guy, or the IT guy's 75 and he doesn't want to do this, and they're not interested in managed services. I'm like, well, first of all, how do you know that I'm not interested in managed services? What did you say? How did you position it? Did you basically say, give me all of your business right now and then I'll do this? Like, how did you position it? My typical advice on the small account is, because it doesn't require as much time and strength and trust to build that relationship, because it's a less risky relationship for a company that small. I would typically tell people, hey, I'm happy to do this move for you. And just so you know, this is how it would position. Before I get too far into it, what is your plan to manage the technology once it's in the new office? And then I would listen, blah, blah, blah. If I find out they're at least they're like, well, we don't really have that. We're not really thinking about this. Then I go, I totally hear you. It sounds like this isn't like a pressing issue for you today. Let me take a look around the office and just see what the tech is that I'm dealing with and see what I got to kind of untangle and retangle. And then I'll tell you what the final quote is, but it's going to be between this and this. I'd go there, see if there's any problems I can identify that might indicate that they need an MSP short term. If there is, then I would say, hey, we're actually a management company. We're actually an IT partner. We're not really like a moving company. We know how to do this and we're happy to. But basically, if you were under agreement, I could give you this rate. If you weren't under agreement, I could give you this rate. The choice is totally up to you. And I would basically go in using it as an extended onboarding, and I'm going to try to sell a managed service agreement whenever I can. So for me, I'll do that on a small company. But if somebody just says, will you move me? I'm not going to say yes or thank you, sir. Move them and then leave a pamphlet on the desk. I'm going to try to upsell right then and there, but I'm not necessarily going to turn down the work if I have the slack hours. Now, for a bigger company, a lot of times people say, well, I'm afraid. This is what an MSP might be saying, and I want to hear what you think, Adam. Let's say an MSP says, but Adam, aren't you afraid that you're never going to get your full agreement in there? Aren't you afraid that they're going to cannibalize your offer if you do piecemeal? How are you ever going to make money? What do you tell them?
So there's the concept of lost leaders, right? Like where you're going to drop in a lost leader. Like we don't do lost leaders. I would not advise in doing that. But if you get involved in someone's move, if you get to walk into their office and they show you what's behind the curtain, you're in a great position to stay in touch with them until this is our strategy, until something breaks. Right.
Yeah.
But you basically, you got to see that, hey, this guy's got his entire network routing through one, Linksys switch or something he bought 10 years ago from Best Buy. Hey, yeah, we can move you. Do you want to you need some help kind of modernizing this a little bit? Would you like some help? How do you do this right now? Like you said, hey, you're now involved in their business. And that's a great place to be. You have a contact, you have someone in there who can make a decision. You're helping them solve a problem, and then stay in touch. That it always pivots. And the false thing that I think a lot of people maybe paint the glorious picture of hey, we have a 500 user contract. Those can be brutal sometimes, and those negotiations can be really rough. And by the way, there's a trend that we've been noticing in certain areas of private equity roll-ups where contracts don't matter to these guys. They come in and buy a firm, and some of your listeners may have experienced this if they've been a part of a roll-up. Some of these guys just come in and steamroll over contracts and relationships that you've had for 20 years. They mean nothing. And, they kind of take the, hey, F you, sue me mindset.
Yeah. And you're not going to win. You can try.
Yeah. For us, anytime you're engaged and you have the ability to nurture that account and stay in touch and help them when something comes up, it's a lot of work. But the danger I've seen a lot of firms go into, I was talking to a partner yesterday, they go specifically into, they're kind of a consulting firm around risk management. And I cringed when the CEO told me, yeah, I know we're bulking up hiring. We're hiring 4 people, getting ready for the demand. And I was like, oh, do you have the demand yet? No. But these rules are going to change, and we gotta pre-hire. And I'm like, man, that labor cost does not go away once you start. Like that hurts. So, we tend to be pretty conservative there and really try to listen to, but again, to your point, to answer your question quickly, yeah, we would take that job. We would take the job to help them move, and we would stay in touch and see if there's something else we can help them with next.
Yeah. So again, at mid-market, also remember that every mid-market relationship is or should be co-managed to some degree. Like it would be irresponsible to have 500 employees and no IT staff.
Correct.
That would be kind of crazy. So you're going to be co-managed to some degree. Now, can I ask you kind of a dumb question? Are you pricing, if you go in with a full boat, or if you're billing by user, like under a managed contract, are you still billing per device or per user? And if so, what happens to your rate? Are you scaling down the rate a lot, or is it staying more or less the same?
It depends what they're trying or what kind of co-management they want to do, right? So an easy option is like monitoring, alerting on a firewall or a switch stack, right? Or endpoint protection. We have a couple different offerings we can drop in there. Hey, do they just want the licensing as a service? They just want to subscribe to the licensing as a service. They want us to deploy the agents to all the machines. And then they want to handle all the moves, adds, and changes, the updates, the policies, everything like that. Cool. Here's a price for that. Or if it's no, hey, I want you guys to own protecting my endpoints. I want more of like a endpoint protection, MDR alerting service where something goes bump in the night. Quest, it's your job to change. So you have that conversation. A lot of people, you can get in trouble if you assume you know what the other person's thinking there, right? So if you price a cost per license for, I don't know, CrowdStrike or Silence or SentinelOne or whatever endpoint detection program you want to roll out there, and you're just providing the license, that's one version of it. Or if it's no, here's the responsibilities I want you to have. So you go through that RACI chart and kind of divide it up. We have bundled prices because you got to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. So we'll bundle services together and provide a price. But we're always asking like, hey, is this your expectation, or is there something else you'd like to see here? And if they take on more responsibility, then we'll adjust. If they add more responsibility to us, it's always the harder direction to go. Like, yeah, we could do that, but it's going to cost more.
Yeah.
A lot of clients don't necessarily want to hear that, but you got to be candid about that.
But I mean, the term that I've heard thrown around a lot is a responsibility matrix, which is just like a more fancy way of saying the same thing. Like, we're going to matrix this out so that if blank happens, whose job is it? And this is a good segue, because if you've never done co-manage, or if you've never done large co-manage, this is a pretty important part of the job, because you just said like you can get in so much trouble oversimplifying your SKU, oversimplifying the offer to try to make one bucket that catches all co-managed. But at mid-market, okay, well, what if they have a database person and they have an in-house software dev that that fixes their ERP? That's it. Versus another person who has 3 help desk people. Like, those are totally different teams. So that's a totally different RACI charts, right? Yeah. And as a result, totally different pricing, one would presume.
Yeah, and it really has to do with the level of effort as far as what it's going to take care of that for them, right? So we, like, as an example, we did, I'm sure most of your teams are very well aware of like Veeam, right? Veeam backups, right? Back in the day when the Veeam first came out, we were one of the first Veeam Cloud Connect partners. So I still laugh about the Reddit post about this one, but we kind of played a fun game where we threw out $9 a terabyte per month for Veeam Cloud Connect backups. And this was back when like some of our major competitors were charging like, I don't know, $45 to $50 a terabyte. And so we just decided like, hey, let's throw a little bit of a hand grenade into the tent and see what happens, because we knew what our costs were for our storage and for the Veeam licensing as a managed service provider. And so we tried it out. It worked really well. We got, I don't know, probably like 200 new accounts off of that one. But what we didn't realize was we got some of the accounts that were very, 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 very focused on price, secondary effects of things, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're just doing a backup as a service target, you're just providing the target.
Yeah.
Here's the target address, plug it into your controller and start shipping jobs.
Yeah.
We weren't confirming the jobs succeeded in backing up. We weren't monitoring that. We weren't providing any of our typical like full bundled managed service pricing where we handle the backups for the client. We were kind of like, what like blob storage is today. Like, hey, here's your target, have at it. That was kind of the play there. And so that's where you had that conversation with folks. Hey, this is a target. Would you like us to confirm or test your backups? Well, and they'd be like, well, yeah, can you do that? Okay, sure. Here's what that would look like on a monthly basis on a terabyte charge or, T&M. So that's an extreme example where we kind of tested the market a little bit on that one. I still got one guy, a client who just still curses my name for that one, but it was fun. It was a good time.
We did a backup thing where a similar idea where we're like deploy an open source backup solution. It was file based. And it was, the cost was like $0, and it's files they're not images, they're super small. Like, let's just roll this out. And it was same idea. Like, we're just backing up files for you. That's all we're getting out of this particular SKU, And then we had this company come to us and we had been backing up like encrypted files on a server for like 4 months that they barely used, right? Somebody tried to ransom their server, but didn't realize that they didn't even ever use it. So they didn't even know it got ransomed. And we were backing up like unusable encrypted files, like backing up malware or something for like 4 months. And they were like, how could you let this happen? We're like, we didn't let anything happen. Like, you said, make this thing also over here. That's what we gave you, That's why it was like a couple of bucks. But that's an interesting observation that when you try to disrupt in the realm of price, you get that bottom quartile of people who, my old boss used to say, there's 25% who will buy from anybody, 25% who won't buy from anybody, and the 50 in the middle requires sales. So if you drop your pricing all the way to the bottom, you get the 25 who will buy from anybody. They're not particularly loyal, they're not particularly friendly, and they're usually the most difficult people.
Yeah. And we tried to evaluate like a cross-sell, upsell opportunity. But what was fun from a partner perspective was I think I have like 20 or so MSPs who came in. And rather than standing up their own backup instance, they said, hey, this is cool. Can you guys do multi-tenancy? So we said, yeah, we can do multi-tenancy for you. So we would sell them like 200 terabytes, and then they would take that to the SMB market provide the management layer. And they were totally cool with us just providing the terabyte target, which that was an unintended. I'd love to say that was a game plan I had around, hey, I'm going to grow my partners by doing this. No, that was not it. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes you just happen into those opportunities.
Yeah. And those have been the ones that actually have stayed around for the last 8 years, 9 years in that world.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, especially we're talking about if an MSP is listening to this and they're trying to go up market, you got to remember, if you're working with companies who are buying and selling each other, vendor contracts very rarely survive acquisition anymore. That's just not the PE world that we're in anymore. They will bring in their people, and there's a bunch of kind of like pseudo legal ways to do that, to dissolve entities and stuff. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that the relationships are more important than the contracts anyway, at that level.
Yeah, the relationships are definitely important. But at the risk of sounding cynical, I'm not like, X-Files, trust no one, but people are going to move on. Decisions get weird when, big money comes in. So just, if you're putting together a contract, price it for yourself to make sure that you're comfortable with that contract.
Yeah.
Like don't price in hope or, loyalty to a certain person that may or may not really be reciprocal in that loyalty. And it sucks because we all play golf together and we go have cocktails and all that kind of stuff. But when money gets on the table, things can go a little weird sometimes. So if you're running your business, I would say counsel someone maybe who's been there before. We had a huge contract that we won one time. And an old gray hair in the sled world, person who'd been through multiple iterations, found out that we won the contract, and he said, "You're going to regret that." And it wasn't like a, "Hey, great job. Hey, congratulations. Hey, you've been pursuing this account for 30 years." It was, "You're going to regret that." And he was right. He was absolutely
Jeez.
right. It was, sometimes you think you're pursuing something that you're like super, super excited about. And when those types of dollars get involved, it can be painful when,
Yeah.
when outsiders come in and just flip the script on it. So price things, do what you say you're going to do. That's all you can really do. And then what happens next is going to happen next. But
Yeah, I love that. The don't price in hope. That's the pull quote from this episode. And don't price in loyalty, because the foot in the door pricing is terrible strategy. Foot in the door project is a different thing. But if you're foot in the door pricing, then you're going to turn very quickly. You essentially become the doormat that they block the doors with. And if you think you can go in and undercut and undervalue yourself aggressively on one project and then get premium pricing on the second project, I think you might be daydreaming a little bit.
yeah, that rarely, yeah, the entry level pricing concept, like I gave on that backup example, for that firm, you're the low cost backup guy.
Yeah,
Like you're not gonna drop in a $285 an hour network engineer,
right.
if they're paying you $9 a backup. It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah,
So yeah, starting out with those entry level projects though is a great way, like the DBA example I gave.
hmm,
Like, hey, go in there and help them solve a problem that their team can't handle.
yeah.
And then just stay involved.
I love this to go back. You mentioned the full boat RFP. Dave Sandler used to say, if you didn't write the RFP, you've already lost it. And if somebody's got an RFP of that size, you got to remember not to make this sound corrupt or something, but also business is not a talent show. It's not a meritocracy. They're not going to get every option in the world and make an objective decision. They don't have 2 years to vet all 1,000 submissions. They just don't. So what do they have to go on? They have to go well, what do we know about these people? And in reality, very often incumbent providers help write RFPs. You guys have probably written many RFPs or templated many RFPs. And once I'm not a big fan of, I'm too much of a control freak to be a big RFP guy.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't love RFPs for kind of that reason. But where I was going with that is creating relationships with people at this band of the market is more important than shoot for the moon RFPing and just trying really hard to go for all of these things and then undercutting everybody else. First of all, you're just skewing the average and you're not going to win that business anyway. In a second, we're going to get into the family business culture thing, but I want to take a quick detour first. I mentioned this to you. We chatted really briefly the other day when we were introduced. This is an observation I've made. This is anecdotal.
Okay.
You might tell me I'm wrong, and that's okay. Here's something that I found earlier in my career. When I started doing deals at bigger companies, and I did for a small amount of time, I sold into Fortune 500, Fortune 100. And I was so intimidated going into those sales calls. Of course. I'm used to doing $2,000 a month deals. Now you're talking to the C-suite of a brand that you've known since you were born, that's a 100-year-old company. And I was intimidated, of course. And I was, the first few calls, I was kind of I wonder how my process is going to adapt here. And I noticed a trend. Maybe it was because I was overhyping it so much in my head, but when I started working in bigger companies, selling into bigger companies, I expected that the echelon of executive or the echelon of buyer I was working with was going to be different people. These were going to be erudite, well-educated, even-keeled, emotionally stable people. And what I found is not only was that not the trend, meaning the average professional maturity of the contact was linear to the size of the business, in many ways, I actually found it to be the inverse. That the higher up you go in major organizations, the more room there is to hide incompetence. And so the more incompetence can run free. Any thoughts? And let me ask you another way. Tell me the name and the company of the dumbest person you've ever done a deal with.
Okay. Well,
I'm just kidding.
no, that's well. So there's a lot of ways I could answer that. So it was interesting to see when Elon bought Twitter, and I use this example sometimes. I'm chatting about this. He went in there and gutted the environment by 80%, right? And turned it into X, which is now, pretty prolific as far as a communication platform compared to where it once was, and from a revenue generation standpoint. And I wouldn't disagree with you that IT is one of those areas where I don't want to say it's fraud, but the parable of the emperor has no clothes.
Mm-mm.
You ever heard that one?
No.
It's an old story where this con man comes to a town and starts pretending to manufacture clothing, and the people in the town are like, they come into a store and they can't see anything, and he's like, well, he's a great con man. He gets them to believe, well, you can't see it because you're just a normal person, but these are the most exquisite, rugs and gowns and all this kind of stuff. And so people start paying him for nothing. And then the emperor hears about it, and he eventually works his way through the court, dupes the emperor into being his main, whatever you call the dude who dresses the emperor.
Mm-hmm.
And he, designs this exquisite outfit for the emperor's like new coronation or marriage ceremony or something. And the emperor decides to put it on and stroll down the main concourse. And everyone's so duped. Everyone's so like, hey, the emperor can see this. It must be beautiful. The dude's naked walking down the street. And it's a little kid who has to basically shout out, dude, the emperor's butt naked walking down the middle of the street. And then everyone kind of like snaps out of their hypnosis and realizes that they've been duped by this person who's kind of painted this glorious picture of the art of the possible or whatever. And it's all bullshit. That's about 80% of IT. I mean, not to be too cynical about it, but there's a lot of people out there trying to sell the emperor a new silver bullet, a new widget, a new something. And rather than, hey, emperor, get in the gym, stop eating garbage, lift weights, and, do some cardio, and you'll look good in anything.
Yeah.
They want to sell him some pretend new software solution or new AI platform or this new widget. And that's what MSPs, that's what we're dealing with. We know what it takes to patch, manage, maintain, and operate people, right? We know the builders out there who actually know what the internet is built on and how potentially fragile all of those routing schemes are. But there are people out there who are evangelizing. Like there's one that's classic. Hey, I'm going to route my voice traffic across a direct internet connection, and I'm just going to route it. You're not going to determine the route? No. You're not going to set up a point to point? No. You're just going to let the internet bounce your voice traffic around? Yeah. Oh, okay. And you're going to build your enterprise on that? Yep. I bought this new hosted phone system and I'm just going to do that. Mm-hmm. Sweet. And people sell them that and they tell them it's going to work, but they're not dictating the path. They're not monitoring the quality of service. They were sold an invisible cloak by a con man. And then they get ticked off when it doesn't perform. I said, well, dude, so you as an operator in an enterprise have some responsibility to validate.
Yeah.
This is what you say it is.
Yeah.
And if it's not, it's, I've rarely come across someone in the enterprise or middle market who, when something like that goes sideways, is like, hey, you know what? My bad. We didn't validate this. We didn't check the path. We didn't check the connectivity. Like that doesn't happen. It's the provider.
Right.
Yeah.
Or a lower level employee that they've got a mill of people beneath them just getting fired for mistakes that executives made. Uh-huh. And by the way, I don't think this is IT specific. My point is that I mean, I've done C-suite deals with household name brands, and I'm like, what? What are you saying? You don't know anything, because because sometimes they just get so out of touch, and I don't mean to sound too much like a punk, I'm not trying to like sound as negative as I'm sounding either, but I think my takeaway, here's the reason I'm bringing this up. And the reason that to me, it was actually a very freeing realization that it's not that they're worse or better people. They're just the same people as everywhere.
They're just people.
People they run countries, they run internets, they run your software, they build your house. People are doing everything that really can't go wrong. And it's all run by people who are exactly the same. And to me, that was actually a very freeing revelation that you go into high level rooms and nobody knows anything, And so I used to be afraid to ask questions because I was afraid to look dumb. But how many times do you ask a question or you just realize that half of the room is faking it,
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just a quick aside. I want to ask you real quick about, I know I'm kind of kept you. Oh, go ahead.
Well, there's a great book called, what's it called? It's called, I would recommend it for anyone who has this. It's written by Patrick, I'm going to butcher his last name, Lencioni, Lencioni. It's called Getting Naked. It's exactly about what you're talking about. That concept of asking the dumb question that everyone in the room also doesn't know the answer to, but is pretending to know the answer to. And by the way, I'm the first one to throw my name in the hat as far as like, having an ego and pretending I know stuff I don't like, but it's a great book if you're, the concept of like consulting or talking to people in higher level organizations. They're just people, and they're all probably curious about the same thing you are, but most people are so uncomfortable. They have to pretend they know the answer. They have to pretend they know, what's going to happen in the stock market next month or whatever. Like no one knows. No one has any idea what's about to happen in our economy.
Did you hear that story? Richard Branson told the story in an interview where he was in a meeting and they were having this like really important conversation with his finance team. And he was just sort of staring blankly, and the CFO pulled him into another room and took a sidebar. And he said, "Richard, do you know the difference between gross profit and net profit?" And Richard was like, "I don't know what that means." And he's already running Virgin Airlines.
Yeah.
But he's like, "I don't know what that means. I have no idea." So then he just like drew a fish net, and he was like, the ocean is full of fish and the net is, and he was like, "Oh, thanks." And he's kind of famous for being sort of underqualified in a way for what he does. And yet he's like one of the most successful entrepreneurs of all time because he focuses on client experience. Anyway. That's
that qualification. That qualification can block you sometimes, like knowing the answer or like having a perceived outcome that can block you from making a decision that could actually help you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We're
just slinging great advice today, Adam. We're on fire.
We're full of shit. Just kidding.
Both can be true. No, I want to ask you real quick. I do want to just land on a couple questions about working with family, because again, I think a lot of our listeners are hiring younger family members, or were hired by an older family member. And my observation of working with family it was this, and it was a piece of advice I got from somebody in the restaurant business. He said, "Hey, just keep in mind, you're going to advance the fastest, and you're going to have the slimmest margin for error. Everybody is going to be looking at you all the time when things happen. So you have to be above reproach. And if you are, you will advance." Now, that's not always, that's not the case in every situation, in every business. He's like, yeah, you can get taken care of, but everything will fall to you, and everyone will blame everything on you if you do anything wrong. And that, to me, it set me free in a way to know, like, okay, I just have to, like, I can earn respect here if I am worth respecting, and it might take longer than other people, but it's okay, because look, whatever, there's trade-offs. I'm not asking you to talk about the experience as a Nepo baby in a business, because look, if for anybody, nobody could have listened to the last hour of us talking and think, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You obviously know how to do what you're doing. But I guess I want to hear what your thoughts are and just a little bit about your experience.
I've talked to other folks who, are second generation as well. My experience, I've been pretty lucky, was my father, Tim's a great coach. And he allowed me to learn some lessons. Like he would tell me, hey, that might not work, or don't do that, or here's what I would do. But he also allowed me to make mistakes. One of the hardest things that I've ever done, and one of the things I kick myself about, is hiring decisions.
Mm.
And we have a pretty specific methodology on how and when and who we hire. And any time that I deviated from that, it took me about 5 or 6 hires, like 5 or 6 placements where I deviated from that strategy. And it always blew up in my face every single time. I would go into his office. I'd be like, hey, I got this person. I think it's going to work out. Here's what I think. And he'd walk me through the criteria that we typically went through. And there'd be some like major red flags, like at least 2 or 3. And he's like, well, do you want to do it? I'm like, yeah, I think we could do it. And he knows. I talked to him about this afterwards. He knew in that meeting, he's like, Adam thinks he can control the outcome. Adam thinks he can change something here. Yeah. And what was really fortunate for me was I was allowed to go through that and make those mistakes. Nothing that would put the business at risk, but it probably cost, a hire and retrain a couple times. So it wasn't free, but it definitely, it was definitely a good experience. And then, there's people in the organization, outside the organization, who are always going to think of you as the boss's kid. And that's why you're there. And cool, let's wait till adults are in the room before we talk. And, that's okay. You just gotta handle that respectfully. But then a lot of other folks, that's not the scary part. The scariest part is when people tell you you're doing a good job and you're not. Like flattery. Like that's a poison. That's the poison you got to really, really run away from, is, when people tell you, oh, that's a great idea. And it's a horrible idea. But, you came up with it, you're the boss's kid, and they're going to flatter your decision to your face. That's what you really got to be careful of. Not the people who like call BS on you. I like that. That's fuel. That's good stuff. I mean, I'm an ultra marathon guy. I went into the infantry out of college, and, went through Ranger School to see if I could do it. Like, I like that kind of stuff. Like, that's cool. Yeah. Doubt me. Let's see what happens. Yeah. But flattery and ego and stroking the ego, that's poison. Yeah. That's dangerous.
Especially for high drive individuals where we have, I'm going to lump us together for a moment. Like, we might have actually a tendency towards an overinflated ego, right? Because we're high drive and it's kind of the nature of our psychology. So when people fill it up with hot air, that's poison is the perfect word for that. Like, if flattery is poison and honesty is fuel, that's something I'm taking away from you in this interview that I'm gonna quote you on, but I'm gonna use that liberally because that's really valuable. But to your point of something you said earlier, I've always found that there's a lot of advantages to being underestimated.
It gets me excited.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm gonna kick your ass.
Yeah, right.
You don't even see it coming. Yeah, and that gets me fired up. Yep.
What advice do you have? Let's say this way: what advice do you have from your side of the table to the CEO who's listening, who wants to hire her nephew, or she wants to hire her son in a sales role, IT role, anything? What advice would you give to somebody who's a first generation entrepreneur who's going into a multi-generational situation?
I'd make sure that was something that they wanted to do. And if it's a stopgap or a temporary position before they actually get involved in what they want to do, just be honest with yourself about that and don't take it personally. There's relationship hires that we've made that have been temporary. They're placements, they're friends and family, they're folks who are just stopping through. But if they're going to be part of your inner circle or someone you expect to build with, bring them into that situation early and kind of validate that expectation with them. Like, hey, you're coming in your board could be like you, your wife, and maybe an outside counsel or outside, advisor. Hey, I want you to come to this lunch. and I want you to meet with the board and talk about what our business plans are for the next couple of years. And if that member of the family isn't excited about it or isn't like asking questions or engaged, be honest with yourself. They're not all of a sudden going to get interested in your business.
Yeah.
That's
really good advice.
I have 5 siblings. There's my brother and I are in the business. I'm in the day-to-day operations. He's in marketing, and my 3 sisters kind of came through a little bit, but there was no expectation that any of us were gonna be involved.
Right. Yeah, I like that. So just give them a chance to, like, obviously you don't want to put somebody in a role they don't want to do, but I give the same speech every time when I do a friends or family hire, because I'm always stuck in the future. I'm thinking about what's going to happen in the future of things. So I say, hey, I have a policy where I can't hire anybody I can't fire. Will our relationship survive if I fire you? And that's really the beginning and end of the conversation. And if we go, I don't think our friendship could make it, then it's too expensive. It's too expensive of a risk. There's a lot of people who could do a job, and you can go get a job somewhere else. But I'm not going to risk, not going to Thanksgiving next year over giving you a job, And sometimes Thanksgiving turns into board meetings, and that's just kind of our lot in life as like family business people. But listen, man, I kept you for way longer than I was supposed to, but I just want to ask if you have any final any other things that you want to share while we're on the hot mic before I let you go.
No, I appreciate, the conversation. It's been a blast. I love what you put together and what you put out there and how you're helping MSPs, approach things from a sales standpoint and the empathy of understanding what the other person in the room's dealing with. I think that's the only way you really build. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, man. And Quest, obviously, big MSP looking, you're always open to other partnerships with MSPs, right? So if an MSP wanted to learn more about you or Quest or find out ways to potentially collaborate with you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so partners at questsys.com. We have the Quest Partner Program on LinkedIn, building that page out and content. And then our website is www.questsys.com, QUESTSYS.com.
Awesome. Thanks again for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.